Hello and welcome to Beyond the Classroom, a closer look at those here at Windermere Prep. I'm joined today by high school art teacher, Mr. Brad Ramsey. Coach, thank you for joining us today. How are you doing?
Very well, Mr. Gass. How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you. Let's begin at the beginning. Where were you born?
I was born in Reading, Pennsylvania. It's just north of Philadelphia by about an hour eastern side of Pennsylvania.
Is that where you grew up?
Where I grew up, and I went to high school. Also went to college there.
What did your mother and father do?
My mom was a secretary and a bookkeeper, and my father was a real estate agent.
Any siblings?
I did have one brother. He's older. He's 53 years old.
What school did you attend?
I went to Wilson High School, and my college was Franklin and Marshall College. It's in Lancaster, Pennsylvania.
Did you have a childhood hero growing up?
Not really. I think my first, it's a lot of the kids might even understand that being a football coach. Everybody was a football player that I, tried to do. And there was a individual named, it was amazing to watch him. It was Chuck Foreman, who was a running back for the Vikings. You might know a little bit of history. You're a Vikings fan. And Chuck Foreman had this great move where he'd run and he'd spin, and he'd do the spin move. So I was 5 years old. I was practicing the spin move. So I was a 6-year-old football player running with number 44 on the chest and trying to do the Foreman spin move. That was probably the only guy, and my hero was because he could spin with a football in his hand.
What was one of your fondest childhood memories?
I think just growing up in an age where, I like the technology, but growing up without technology around you, growing up in the 70s like I did, you had to make your own fun. And we spent a lot of time everywhere from the woods to cornfields to just playing on our own at the playground as kids and growing up around a swimming pool, and then also sports. I wrestled, played football, ran track, played baseball. Even little things like playing box hockey as a kid. They had these little box hockey things, and you pretty much invented our own games back then. And I look back at that as probably one of the more enjoyable times of my life.
What were some of the other activities that you were involved with back in school, high school, middle school, those times?
Really enjoyed the art as pretty much two things. The school, of course, so my academics, and I would do a lot on the football fields, but I really loved to do art, so I would be involved in the art courses and helping out a lot of projects after school. Really enjoyed that, and I was even sell my work here and there. Even from the time when I was about 12 years old, I'd sell some pieces.
How much time did you spend on academics?
A lot, and I always tell the kids, I have a funny story, I really never took home homework, and I think that they look at me like strange, like I'm trying to say you don't need to take home homework, but our bus came at 6 in the morning, so I would literally from 6 in the morning till the start of school, even on the bus, I would work, and I'd do all my work for the next, that'd actually be for the forward days. Every study hall, every lunch, all I would do is that work. If I had some time after school, I would do it so that I wouldn't have to take home a lot of work at night, because when you're in sports, a lot of times you get done to like 6:30. The time you get done and eat, you really don't feel like working. So that's how I would try to handle my academics. I'd get them all done. And if a teacher ever said you had extra time at the end of class, I didn't talk to anybody. I just sat and worked. And I try to give that advice to a lot of the students here. That does really work.
I might be asking the obvious question here, but what was your favorite subject in school?
You know what the funny part is it was in all probability history. I had one of the best history teachers I had ever experienced in 10th grade. Really imbued a love of history and also of reading. And of all things, I was kind of torn whether I was going to be a history major or an art major. And in college, I really enjoyed the art, and I think I learned a lot more. But in high school, it was definitely, of all things, probably history. It was my favorite course.
What was your first car?
It was a Coronet 440 Ford 1967, and it was the ugliest vehicle, powder blue. It was the ugliest vehicle I had ever seen, but it had a humongous engine on the inside of it. And I had that for about a month, and it was too expensive to spend on gas, and it looked like a grandma's car. So then I switched it over to a Buick Grand Sport, which was a little bit more interesting looking than that. So those were my two first cars.
Where did you attend college?
I went to Franklin and Marshall College, a small college. It's a private college in Pennsylvania. It's in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. And it was founded by Ben Franklin and John Marshall. John Marshall was one of the first Supreme Court individuals. He was a famous judge. And also Ben Franklin, of course, everybody knows who he is. And it was founded by them as an independent college even back then.
Now, what originally brought you to Franklin and Marshall?
I had the two choices. I was going to go provisional to West Point, which I had been accepted, but it was provisional means is you have to go through the summer program, and then I, in all probability would have been in their transitional phase, which was prep school for a half year, and then they would have transferred me in the winter term to then go full term, and I was going to be wrestling there. And I wanted to play football, and I spoke to the coach, and he said that you might be able to play the 150-pound league. And I always felt like I could still play at any level, although I don't think anybody thought I could because of my height. And I visited Franklin and Marshall, who was a Division I wrestling program, and they had one stipulation was, they said, hey, if you can allow me to play football, I would really consider to go. He walked down the hallway, and I guess spoke to the football coach, and goes back and goes, if you sign on the paper, you can, we'll have your scholarship ready, and you can attend Franklin and Marshall College, and you can play football. And I signed right there, and that was the end of it because I really wanted to have that opportunity. I wanted to be able to see if I could do it.
So how much wrestling did you do in college?
None. My second game as a Franklin and Marshall football player, we had an injury on. We had a bunch of injuries on our first game against the Merchant Marine Academy, and I was forced to start my second game at running back. And then I was the MVP of the team my freshman year, and I gained a lot of weight to try to survive, and I was up around 170 pounds. The wrestling coach called me, and I think I was 174 that day, and he wanted me to wrestle at 150, and he hung up the phone on me when I told him the weight I was at. So that's how I went to college for wrestling, but never wrestled.
What was your major?
I was an art major with a dual major in art and history.
You graduate with your degree from Franklin and Marshall. What's your first job out of college?
I was a delivery man. I would take and process. My mother she worked with a company that delivered Aramark, which delivers uniforms. So I did that in the summer, and I actually, in between then, I had played football in England. That was the fledgling NFL Europe League. So I did that year, and then I came back and I would deliver that, and then I worked my way into where I was actually what's called a GA, which is a graduate assistant at college. And I worked at Kutztown University as a coach, and also went to school there.
How did you get into teaching?
I took a spring break vacation my second year at Kutztown University, and I took a day trip to the Florida Keys. We were down in Florida on a spring break, so I took a day trip to the Florida Keys, and I stayed there for 4 days. I wrote my resignation letter for my college, because my term was up anyway, so I wrote my resignation letter, and I wouldn't be coming back, and went home, packed up, and I literally moved right back to the Florida Keys in the Marathon, and received a job at the local newspaper right away, and then knew I had that type of a job, and then worked it right into there, and that's why I started teaching down there, because I volunteer coached, and they wanted us to be in the community. So working with the newspaper, I was in the community, worked as a coach. That year I was hired as a coach and a teacher at Marathon, of all things, and then I was switched to a different school. So I ended up at a different school up the way in the Florida Keys. Monroe County, it's the very, very bottom of Florida.
So how does life compare from Pennsylvania life to Florida life?
I live in Florida. That's all you need to say. The memory that I would always have was that you would get up in the morning and the car would be so cold, and you would have a heater that would hit the window. There's frost on the window, but even if you scrape off all of this sheet of ice that accumulated, and it's all dark the whole time. This is all dark, and you're shaving off the ice from the outside, but then on the inside, the moment you breathe, it all gets all smoky. You can't see out the window. So I still remember driving like this, freezing to work in the morning to football practice with a hole that big down the highway, and it would take about 20 minutes till the car would actually warm up enough. And then when I came down to Florida and I took a vacation and I went to the Florida Key. I said, I never knew people like this, lived like this in my entire life. And I lived in England, and it was the same there. So I never knew anything like this existed, so I was sold. So from that moment, I was 23. I think I just turned 23. From that moment on, I knew I didn't really want to live in Pennsylvania anymore, that I really enjoyed Florida.
Coach, when you have time, that being the key phrase, when you have time, what are some of your hobbies? I really like getting out a little bit and still like being out in the wilderness a little bit, getting out. Love spending time with my family. But really, if I had a choice between playing golf and spending a weekend with my family, I'm going to be spending a weekend with my family. So I enjoy that. We do go on vacations. I love to travel. That's, I think, probably the one thing I like to do. I like to travel. I love the Caribbean.
I enjoyed that. I've been to, one of my favorite trips was to Hawaii. So probably the one favorite thing would be traveling.
What's your favorite part of each day?
Favorite part of each day is actually watching kids produce the work they do here. And it really makes me feel good when I see a sense of achievement. So if you can, when you start to develop an idea and then you can finish it, it's such a good feeling. And I see that all the time with, especially with an art. It's one of those wonderful courses that you actually see a tangible result every time you do a project.
Coach, one final question. Where do you see yourself in 10 years?
See myself, hopefully, in a situation just like this. I like it. I enjoy it. I was out of coaching for about 10 years, and I really love being around young people, and I love teaching. I think anybody that's anywhere near this classroom knows that that's kind of fun. I enjoy it, and I really can't see myself doing anything else, and have the opportunity to work with some really good people on the staff and really good administrators and wonderful kids. I think that it's an opportunity, and I'm relishing it now, and I hope that I can have a situation like this in 10 years from now.
And Coach Ramsey, I want to thank you for taking the time to sit down and talk with me and talk about your life beyond the classroom.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gass. Appreciate that.